So critical minerals is going to play a very key role in the whole energy transition. And the question we ask, or we get asked most of the time, is that is there enough minerals, whether you call it green minerals, whether you call it transition minerals, whether you call it critical minerals or strategic minerals? The question that keeps coming up today is there enough of these minerals? And today we've got an esteemed panel who is going to help us to really understand and answer some of these critical questions. So I think without much ado, I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves, which makes it easier to connect with the audience. So your name and probably your institution or organization.
All right, so my name is Luisa Moreno. I'm the president of Defense Metals, which is a junior mining company in Canada.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt Chamberlain and I'm the CEO of the London Metal Exchange.
Hi, my name is Kumaresh Santangayan. I am from Larsen & Toubro, heading the minerals and metals business.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Agesan Rajagopal. I'm a partner at McKinsey based in the Johannesburg office and lead our mining practice across the region.
All right, great. So can you all hear us? If you can hear us, just give me a wave so I know how far we go. Those at the back, can you all hear us? So I did promise the panelists that this would probably be the best panel you attend today. And I'm making that promise to you as well. So I want your full participation. If at any point in time you cannot hear us, just give me a wave and I'll tell my panelists to probably speak louder to you, or they will personally come to and stand in front of you and answer all your questions. Do we have a deal? All right, great. So I think, thank you all for introducing yourselves. And of course, I wanted us to start with the big picture, the optimism. Louisa, I'm going to come to you on this, right? So everywhere I've gone to, every booth I go to, everyone is very optimistic about the fact that demand for critical minerals is going to grow. First of all, what is driving this demand? And number two, is this demand really sustainable all the way to 2050 and beyond?
It is. So critical minerals are many and depends on the country. They have lists. Some have 40, others have 10, and so forth. So obviously, everybody talks about electric vehicles, and projections show if the 60 plus million passenger vehicles that are sold every year, if they have to be electric vehicles, then we would have to increase lithium supply by 10 times, and nickel and graphite and manganese, probably not as much, but rare earths significantly as well. So that is just for electric vehicles, which is one application. But if you look, for instance, at rare earth minerals, in 2012, there was about 100,000 tons of demand. In 2022, that doubled, and that's without electric vehicles. So generally speaking, we are using more smartphones, more smart houses, even the way we do agriculture. All of these things are changing our demand for these minerals. It's not just electric vehicles. So when you look at rare earths alone, that's before the demand for electric vehicles. It has doubled in 10 years. So there is an organic demand because of population growth, because of the way we're adopting technologies. So without a doubt, it is sustainable. The problem is not so much the demand, but it's the supply.
Oh, that leads me to my next question. I think Agesan, demand is really, Louisa tells us that demand is confirmed, right? And the problem is not demand. The problem is not the fact that people wouldn't use it. They would use it. But then again, there's supply. You work in McKinsey. I know you have a crystal ball in McKinsey where you are able to tell us the future. So what are some of the risks with supply if you look into your crystal ball?
Yeah, no, I agree. Demand is exciting, but what's the situation with supply? So if you take that kind of demand, and we've done some research looking at all the announced projects, expansions, obviously depletions as well, projects in pre-feasibility stage to meet some of that demand that's being spoken about by 2030. And we look at that and looked at what is needed to actually get there by 2030. And what we found is, okay, so you're looking at about $300 to $400 billion a year of investment.
Yep.
If you take from mining all the way to smelting, refining, it's significant investment. You're looking at 200 to 500 gigawatts of power required to meet all of that. That's about 10% of renewable capacity in 2030. And then the people, the professionals needed to build and run all these mines. You're looking at more than 300,000 mining professionals. So there are risks. I mean, there's three major risks. I mean, we can go on and on about the risks, but there's three major risks that we see. One is licensing and permitting, because it takes, once you find a mine, to get it running, you're looking at more than 5 to 10 years to actually get that up. But if all the licensing that needs to happen along the way, any delays on that, then you could have further delays and supply challenges. If you look at just delivering these capital projects and spending that amount of capital, very few industries, including the mining industry, have been good at meeting the budgets and time to deliver these projects. So that's another risk that we see. And then lastly, you see the mining industry is in a situation of high cost inflation today. And the cost inflation is a real risk, especially when you link that back to demand. Because if that cost inflation stays and is not managed and prices are too high, you will have much more driving of substitution and creating more volatility on the demand side, which then affects some of these projects. So there's a number of risks, but I think these are the three that we at least see in meeting that.
Yeah, I think you talk about, obviously, licensing, capital, and costs, and
exactly.
Important. These are the key risks. Those at the back, do I still have your attention? I just want to be sure we are all plugged in. Do I still have your attention? If you have it, give me a way. All right, great. So I think you've talked about some of the risk, and obviously those are risks that I know producers or owners of mining companies face. But then, Kumar, I wanted to bring you in here. You've been in the EPC industry for how long? Decades and decades, right? And when you look at these risks that Agisan talked about, from an EPC perspective, do you think you can help companies address some of these risks?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity. It's a good question. The good news is for any EPC contractor, more demand and more project is a good news. When more opportunity comes with the more risk. So then, how do you manage the risk? The risk right from the concept to execution stage to commissioning, the EPC players take the biggest brunt of doing the cost escalation, time overruns, everything he has to manage. But today, we have a robust mechanism to manage this risk. The managing risk is an art. With the kind of cutting-edge technologies, using digital technologies backed by the past data, we are able to overcome this challenge, thereby providing, value proposition to our customers. Having said that, if I talk about we are the company who are right from the mining to metals, so mining has got its own associated risks, and next is the plant building. Today, we use extensively AI tools, digital cutting-edge technologies to provide the best of its kind of solution to our customers, right from the design to construction to commissioning. Having said that, in order to manage the whole process, it's not only the EPC, the customer and EPC and that PMCs have to come together and work in a more synergetic manner so that the ultimate goal is achieved, because time, schedule, and costs and resources is not unlimited. Yep. Finally, as an EPC company, we identify the risk well in advance, and we mitigate this risk with proper risk management. More so, the more and more localization is given emphasis, probably that will help us to overcome more of the supply chain issues which we are facing right now.
Thank you. And I think you raised quite an important point there about how, from an external point of view, you can support those on the inside to meet or address some of these supply risks. Matt, so I think you are the only one that has one of the most unique hats on the panel, right? And you work for the LME. I couldn't think of a question to ask you, right? So I'm going to let you ask yourself your own question and give your own answer. What is the role of the LME in all of this?
Yeah. Well, so it's been really fascinating hearing the different perspectives on critical minerals availability, and certainly at the LME, we very much feel that we see that, and maybe to take an example, a well-documented example of nickel, where the market has had some very significant challenges, the LME has had some very significant challenges because of this perception that there is potentially a lack of supply, that supply wouldn't be available available. There was some very well-documented consequences back in 2022. But certainly where we see that most directly is around brand listing. So as you probably know, if producers want their metal to be traded on the London Metal Exchange, they need to list those brands. And so one thing that we're really keen to ensure is that we have a sufficient number of brands to bring that supply to the market so there is that liquidity. And in a metal like nickel, you really see that. You see the potential crunch, but then you see new sources coming online. And it's getting that balance between making sure you have the liquidity in the market, but making sure all the new supply is of a sufficient standard, be that metallurgical or increasingly ethical as well, to make sure that the market is adequately supplied.
And I think you made my job very easy. You talk about ethical, right? So that sort of leads me on to increasingly it's becoming important that to be able to track that ethical supply chain, we need to talk about transparency. We need to talk about sustainability, right? And once again, I'm going to go to the McKinsey crystal ball, Maxen. Look, transparency has become a thing. And I know the LME and other institutions are working hard to track from the source to the consumer, okay? So how can transparency actually help shine light on these ethical concerns, ESG concerns? What should we look at, or what should companies represented here look at when they think about transparency?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. One is the technical. So how do you track all of this? How do you measure it? And I think that one is getting easier because there's enough of the technology. When you're building a new mine, even in existing mines, you can track all the material along the value chain. You can do the right accounting to get that. And obviously it's not easy to solve, but it can be solved. I think there's the other side of this, which is actually the reporting. And that's where I think the big focus should be, because most mining companies are focused a lot on the reporting according to compliance, which, organizations like the LME is driving a lot and creating that opportunity. But what about mining companies need to be more proactive. So how can you be proactive thinking what could be the future metrics that your end customer is going to be concerned about 5-10 years down the line that they're maybe not so concerned about now, and how do you lead on that? Because that's what's needed. Is it safety? Is it water? Water is obviously still important, but what are the right metrics that you want to shape going forward? Otherwise, you're going to make these big investments, and then only in 10 years are you going to realize, well, I need to now change something. All my mine or my asset is under pressure because of something I didn't really think about, which you could have defined further down.
Yeah, and look, that's very important. Louisa, let me bring you in again from an operator, from a company perspective. Like, is there ever a scenario where we can have mining without doing any harm to the environment or do any harm to the communities? Can we ever have such a perfect mine?
Absolutely not.
That is very heartbreaking.
It's the reality. I mean, one has to even think simple things like the bread that you buy. Is it zero carbon? I mean, there's always some impact in the environment. I think the underlying question is a lot of people think that strategic metals like rare earth or lithium or nickel, that somehow perhaps is it's more damaging to the environment than gold or copper. It does not have to be. It can be done responsibly. I think some folks have seen images out of China where some folks, like in the rare earth mines, they are completely covered in dust. And this is like usually iron adsorption clays. And they're pumping acid in the ground, and that's the way they're leaching it. It does not have to be like that. Even China has improved significantly the way they mine. So critical metals is not dirtier than gold. It can be done properly. And so we will be doing that. We mining companies, obviously in the West, there are standards. We all have to follow those standards. So those things have to be done, but it's not, absolutely clean.
Yeah.
And obviously we will also have to consult in Canada with the First Nations and communities. All of these things are going to be, we will be following it. But the reality is, A lot of people in the West, in Europe, for instance, they have the mentality of not in my backyard. So they want the lithium, they want the EVs, but they do not want mining. So I think there is an education process that has to happen.
And of course, I mean, mining is not perfect, like you rightly mentioned, but the industry is making progress, and education will clearly play a key role in there. And I'm checking in with my audience again. Can you all hear me, and do we have your attention here? Are we just alone by ourselves? Okay, great. I hear one person speak, so I assume everybody is still plugged in. Matthew, I'm going to come to you. Obviously, ESG, transparency, ethics is very important to you at the LME. And I know it was under your leadership that you created the LME Passport a few years ago. So I want us to sort of take a reflection on the LME Passport. How successful has it been? And if you had to go back in time and do it again, is there anything you would do better with the LME Passport?
Yeah, so I think it's been very much a learning journey for us because it's been a learning journey for the whole industry. But we've really enjoyed being involved in this area. And what we've tried to do is to break out the absolute base case standards, the must-haves that we feel that we can require from listed brands. So the best example here is the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible mineral supply chains, basically dealing with worst forms of child labor, conflict finance, and I'm really proud to say that as of the 1st of January this year, those requirements are embedded into LME brand listing requirements, which means that there can be confidence that that new metal coming to the exchange embeds those principles. But to your point, and to the point that's already been made, there are so many sustainability data points. And that's what LME Passport is designed to do. It allows for voluntary disclosure of data. So we have about 450 disclosed data points from across all of our brands, most of them on the environmental side, so that users of the market can see the environmental and other ESG footprint of the metal that they buy, and they can make informed decisions about whether they want to use that metal or not. So I think you have the standards that you can impose, but you also have to have, exactly as you say, transparency so that users can make their own decisions.
Okay, great. And I think it's important that you empower companies with those tools. Come on, I'm going to come to you. I know you've got a lot of experience building projects all around the world, right? So let's run a simulation here. Let's assume I'm a mining company and I come to you as an EPC. And I tell you that I want you to build this mining project for me, okay? So mostly when companies come to you, do they say, I want it very cheap? Or they say, I want it very sustainable? Or do they say, I want it sustainable and cheap? Is there actually anything like low-cost sustainable project? Is it possible?
No, it's a very, very difficult question and very critical question to answer. Having said that, navigating sustainability with the cost effectiveness is a critical process for any company.
Yeah.
The ESG is no longer is a buzzword. It's a reality. One has to accept. When we say that, the general immediate perception is, when I go for sustainable products, it's going to be costly.
Yep.
Maybe in a short term, but it's not going to be. If I talk about, if I come to be for a build a project, today if you see right from the design, what we are doing is, we have moved away from water neutral to water positivity. We design the equipments which are more environmental friendly.
Yeah.
Many of the recycling materials are used at construction site, like the blast furnace slag is being used for sand and many, many initiatives. But of course, and there is a cost element for that. One has to decide that how much we can afford. And today, the consumers are very knowledgeable. They are the kings. They know that what extent, at what price they can pay for a product. Again, it depends upon the economies and geographical locations. But overall, in my opinion, in a long term, the sustainable products are going to stay. If you take a long term of 20 years, 30 years, it's not going to be that costly compared to non-sustainable products.
Yeah. No, and I actually like that answer, that if you take a long-term view, actually it's possible to have a low-cost sustainable project. because caring for the environment ultimately pays, and I think that's a very great point. Look, we've talked about mining a lot. I want us to talk about the host country, sorry.
Oh my God.
So we're not going to talk about mining in the next 5 minutes. I want to hear your plans. We're in Saudi Arabia. Personally, after this conference, I plan to visit other parts of the country. I've been told by a good friend that there's a place called Alula. I don't know if anyone here knows Alula. Yeah, it's beautiful. If you don't know, please take a visit. I plan to do that. So I want to hear all of your plans, and it's going to be random. Where else are you going apart from the Ritz-Carlton Conference Center in Saudi Arabia? Agisan, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, well, for me it's easy because I've been traveling to Saudi Arabia since 2019. So I've been quite lucky to be part of the growth and the recent mining activity. So it's easy. There's more to see, and I'm excited to go to Alula as well soon.
Yeah, I think Alula wins. Kumar, do you plan to go anywhere else apart from the Ritz-Carlton Conference Center?
Yeah, there is a transformative changes that I'm seeing in this place. I had been the part of last year FM Minerals Forum also. From last year to this year, I can say an amazing change, change for positive, change for growth.
Yeah, great. Louisa, any plans to visit anywhere else in this beautiful country?
Maybe Alula?
Alula.
Yeah, so there we go.
So I think we should probably organize a bus to go to Alula from here. Matt, Alula as well?
No, so I'm actually flying over to Jeddah this evening,
Okay.
and I think it's really important to recognize, obviously Saudi Arabia has a hugely promising and effective geological advantage on minerals, but also a huge logistical advantage. And particularly Jeddah, the Islamic port, the incredible growth that's occurring there. We increasingly see metals being stored in Jeddah as part of the global trade flow. So I'm really excited to head over and take a look around the port and understand the logistics side of the world. So I'm really looking forward to that.
And should we expect a partnership? Should we expect an LME partnership with Jeddah in time soon?
Yeah, we would love to, as you're aware, we have a number of listed delivery locations around the world, and it seems to me Jeddah would be a great place to deliver metal.
Certainly.
So we'd love to see what we can do.
All right, so 2 places to go to. Go to Jeddah and go to Alula. You'll find some of my panel members here, and if you have any question, you can follow up with them. But you made a very important point about the importance of the region, the Saudi Arabian region. And Luis, I want to come to you on that. Look, increasingly we are seeing companies decouple from the whole globalization agenda where the world could depend on just 2 countries for all the raw materials, right? Now we are moving into an era where it's more regionalization and even to some extent localization. Every country wants to do it all by themselves. Do you see that as an opportunity or a threat to the current global order?
I think it's going to be very difficult. When we're talking about critical metals, it's not just simple standard mining, right? So in North America, for instance, in Canada, we've been trying to go downstream. We have a mine for lithium. We have many projects, but we have failed to be able to process it, to bring it downstream. After $600 million, we still have failed to do that. In America, there is one mine for rare earth, and that material is sent to China because they have failed after over $1 billion investment. So, building supply chains, just having the metal is not everything. So regionally, countries saying we're going to build it locally is going to be a challenge. It's going to make sense to collaborate with others to be able to deliver.
No, of course, collaboration matters. You talk about America, and of course, Agisan, I want to ask you from an African perspective. I don't think I've met anyone else so passionate and knowledgeable about the continent. So what role do you think Africa will play in this whole critical mineral space moving on?
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity for Africa and already playing a role, but even more so in the future. If you just look at our raw materials reserves, the critical raw materials reserves, if you take across things like copper, cobalt, more than 70% of the world's cobalt. You take manganese, more than 50% of the world's manganese. So you look at platinum group metals, similar. So there's enough scale also bauxite. But the other part of it is the quality of the assets. And that has two benefits, coming back to affordability and sustainability. Because with high quality, high grades, you're seeing that makes them cheaper. But also, you need less energy to process this ore, right? So then you have less energy, that means less carbon. So I think if you look at those 2 points, Africa has a huge role to play. And I think the big question is how Africa can play a role in further downstream, whether it's in the region or partnerships with other regions, including the super region, which could be quite exciting. But I think it needs to be done in a strategic partnership way, which could really unlock this opportunity even more.
And I'm actually very excited about that future. Kumar, I'm going to bring you in here. So once again, I know Mackenzie has a crystal ball, but there's something that the audience want to know. If you look at the EPC world as we know it today, mining is changing, demand is growing, supply is at risk. Do you think the EPC business model will be the same as it is 30 years down the line, or something is going to disrupt it?
You know, again, it's a very good question. The EPC industry in the ore to metal is going to undergo completely transformative change. You know, with more and more advanced technologies for construction, the advanced digital technologies using AI tools and augmented reality, which is going to help us in the cutting down the time. Mining per se, that if you see that mining to it is responsible mining. If you see today, the technology for underground mining and the technology for that, you know, taking mine to ore when we transport, many of these trucks are being decarbonized. When I come to the EPC, I foresee maybe next 10 to 15 years time, there will be a platform to connect all the client PMC and the skilled workers in a platform where one can share the resources, come together and build a plant, share the technology, and more automation will come into place, and more modularization will come. You don't have to build the plant at the location. You will build a plant somewhere else, transport it and bring it to the location, thereby sharing the resources across the globe, and that is going to make a transformative change in the EPC industry.
Indeed, and that transformation is going to come. Matt, I'm going to give you final words. One sentence. Pricing is on the mind of everyone. What role will the LME play in ensuring transparent pricing that will support new projects?
Yeah, so I think in a nutshell, the first step is getting the data out there so everybody can then make the decisions about what they buy. You can then start taking those price signals through spot platforms, through survey pricing, perhaps even in the future through futures contracts, and you can start assigning value to the people who are doing doing this well, and then ensuring that there's that positive feedback loop that they then get rewarded for investing in green technology.
Great. So look, audience, we've talked about data, we've talked about transparency, we've talked about sustainability, we've talked about regionalization and globalization. It's been an amazing panel, and I want you to give a round of applause for yourself for being here and engaging with us. And panelists, thank you as well. A round of applause to my panelists as well.